Amen. Om. Amen. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. So a great good night to everyone. I see we have Keith with us as well. Hello, Keith and Cindy. Yay. A nice aggregation. So Swayam, you have the book open there?
Brother Shankara, but I don't remember which page.
Okay, this says we're on page
85.
85.
85. Okay.
The
So
poem is It's Rigged.
it's rigged. Okay.
Would you be so kind as to read that for us?
My pleasure. It's rigged. It's rigged. Everything in your favor. So there is nothing to worry about. Is there some position you want? Some office? Some acclaim? Some award? Some con? Some lover? Maybe two? Maybe three? Maybe four? All at once? Maybe a relationship with God? I know there is a gold mine in you. When you find it, the wonderment of the earth's gifts you will lay aside as naturally as does a child a doll. But, dear, how sweet you look to me, kissing the unreal. Comfort, fulfill yourself in any way possible. Do that until you ache. Until you ache, then come to me again. It's rigged. It's rigged. Everything in your favor. So there is nothing to worry about. Is there some position you want? Some office? Some acclaim? Some award? Some con? Some lover? Maybe two? Maybe three? Maybe four all at once? Maybe a relationship with God? I know there is a gold mine in you. When you find it, the wonderment of the earth's gifts you will lay aside as naturally as does a child a doll. But, dear, how sweet you look to me, kissing the unreal. Comfort, fulfill yourself in any way possible. Do that until you ache, until you ache. Then come to me again.
Anybody? Anything to say about this remarkable poem?
I think it is amongst the most reassuring collection of whatever number of lines that one can ever find, in the sense that even in the beginning, I mean, everything is rigged in your favor. There's nothing to worry about. You can go do what you want, and maybe you even want a relationship with God, enjoy everything, but then when you ache, then come back to me again. I mean, it gives freedom to basically explore,
Yes.
do everything, but knowing that it's all in our favor at the end.
A very nice reading of the poem. Anyone else? Oh, hello, Bart. Good to see you.
Hello, hello everyone. Thank you. Namaste.
Well, this is definitely Rumi the teacher. This is Rumi, the illumined one, speaking as the divine presence. That's how it seems to me. And saying, well, the lines, how sweet you look to me, kissing the unreal. But dear, how sweet you look to me, kissing the unreal. Comfort, fulfill yourself in any way possible. Do that until you ache, until you ache. Then come to me again. And that just seems like the divine being saying, I've created all this. Enjoy it as best you can. But when you see through it, when you find that gold mine in yourself, it'll all, uh, the gold mine, which of course is in Christian terms, the kingdom of God within. When you find that, when you touch that, everything outside seems, as he says, like a child's doll.
So the gold mine from a Vedantic perspective, is that Savikalpa or Nirvikalpa?
No, Savikalpa. Anything, this is the thing to, from a Vedantic perspective, the thing to continue to understand is that anything you can experience is by definition still within time, space, and causation. And so any realization that you experience, which one of the terms for that is Salvikalpa Samadhi. Um, and this is what Jesus is speaking of when he said, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. They shall know God. This is still a knowing. This is still a seeing. But then Jesus also gestures toward the Nirvikalpa, the peace that passeth all understanding. There's no words, it's because there's no experiencer there. The experiencer has completely been absorbed into the totality. And that spiritual ecstasy, it's said, most people never come back. If they do come to that realization, they don't return. If they do, they last a number of days, and some very few remain as teachers, either of the wisdom path or of the love path. Rumi clearly remained to teach us the love path. Anyone else have anything to say about this remarkable collection of thoughts? Okay, I'm going to ask you, Swayam, to read it one more time before we move on. Because, as I said, this is Rumi as instructor. So let's just hear his instruction.
Sure. It is rigged. It is rigged. everything in your favor, so there is nothing to worry about. Is there some position you want? Some office? Some acclaim? Some award? Some con? Some lover? Maybe two? Maybe three? Maybe four all at once? Maybe a relationship with God? I know there is a gold mine in you. When you find it, the wonderment of the earth's gifts you will lay aside as naturally as does a child a doll. But, dear, how sweet you look to me, kissing the unreal. Comfort, fulfill yourself in any way possible. Do that until you ache, then come to me again. So again, the word that strikes me is when you find it, no if you find it. It's when you
Exactly.
find it.
Yes. Exactly, Swayam. All of these, without exception, this is something I've noticed about this book. Without exception, every one of these saints says when, not if. It is your destiny. And as Saint Teresa of Avila says, it is only in us that God gets so confused that he asks questions. We'll marvel at those lines when we come to them. It is only in us that God gets so confused that he asks questions. Anything else? All right, the next one is My Lips Got Lost. Haima, would you like to read this? Haima?
Oh, sure, Brother Shankara. Definitely. My lips got lost. My lips got lost on the way to the kiss. That's how that's how drunk I was. Luckily, though, I still connected with the most tender part of her. The moon conceived. What a wild looking baby we are going to have. My lips got lost. My lips got lost on the way to the kiss. That's how drunk I was. Luckily, though, I still connected with the most tender part of her. The moon conceived. What a wild looking baby we are going to have.
Rumi gets around.
Yes, he does, doesn't he?
Now he's having a baby with the moon.
Yep.
All
And
right.
a wild looking one at that.
Well, it'd have to be.
Mhm.
The moon.
Well, this is Rumi winking at us. You know, I've commented on Rumi's humor. He's winking at us. I don't mean he doesn't mean what he says, but he's just saying it with a wink. You know? My lips got lost on the way to the kiss. That's how drunk I was. Well, drunk on what? Drunk on the ecstasy of spiritual bliss. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, I drink no ordinary wine. I drink the wine of bliss, mother's bliss. It's true of, I think, every one of these poets that's in this book, that they speak of, they write of the conjugal aspect of spiritual love. that connection at that in that way they may no longer have any physical relationships with anyone. Although, as St. John of the Cross says in one of his most moving poems, don't think I don't think about it. Don't think it's not that possibility, that reality is not there for me. But I'm going to stick to my vows. It's a remarkable, remarkable poem. Coming from what St. Teresa of Avila said was the most angelic man she'd ever met.
I
So
think that's
anybody
pretty
else have any?
I
Yes,
think
sir.
that's I think that's pretty extraordinary because a lot of people in his position might find it difficult to be so upfront and forward about like a subject like this that you're
Well, you
discussing.
know, he had to run for it at one point. You know, they all
Yeah, and it's
go ahead.
it's interesting because it humanizes it. We can relate to that, you know.
Yes, exactly. And that's very much their intention, I believe, for us to be able to equate what they are. It's not that we compare ourselves to them, that doesn't work. But the possibility of being something so extraordinary is there for all of us. Anything else about this? From one point of view, shocking. Well, making love to the moon. What a wild looking baby we're going to have. Of course, the spirit of the moon, who knows, other than these who have transcended our physical limitations and are moving freely in the world of the spirit. Who knows what the spirit of the moon is? Certainly, it's been described in every mythology as being pretty remarkable. It's been so long since I read it, I don't really remember anymore, but Joseph Campbell has a long section on it in one of his books about the various mythological concepts of the sun and the moon.
Um, I was also wondering and somewhat curious how much of Daniel Ladinsky's imagination and interpretation of the poem came into this version, because the only reason I wonder is some of Kabir's poems, the way we have read it in Hindi,
Mhm.
is very different than Ladinsky's interpretation. Like the fish being thirsty, him including the beer in that.
Mhm.
I mean, certainly adds a punch to the poem.
Well,
So,
I don't think that he added anything. My sense, this is just my sense, from reading not only what's in this book, but reading about him, I became curious about him. I don't think he added anything. I think he tried to, in translating these poems, he tried to translate just not the language, but just the meaning. Not just the language, but the meaning. And so he put it in terms that we're likely to relate to now, like the fish asking for a beer. No, who knows what in Kabir's time, what that would have been, but probably something that we wouldn't relate to very much. Some preparation of soma, perhaps, or something. Who knows? No, I think Ladinsky tried to be faithful, as I understand it from reading about him. He tries to be faithful to the meaning of the poem, of what he's interpreting. But he freely admits their interpretations. They're not, in any sense, scholarly translations. And most of what we read of these people are scholarly translations of people who have studied the language in which these people wrote, which was not modern language. Even whatever Kabir wrote in, whatever Rumi wrote in, it's not modern Hindi or modern Persian. So instead, Ladinsky studied what the scholars had translated and then tried to find an interpretation that would make sense to us without violating the intention of the poet. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else, please? People are being pretty quiet tonight. Maybe it's just a quiet night. I guess you won't mind. Great lions can find peace in a cage, but we should only do that as a last resort. So those bars I see that restrain your wings, I guess you won't mind if I pry them open. Once again, Rumi winking at us. I guess you won't mind. Great lions can find peace in a cage, but we should only do that as a last resort. So those bars I see that restrain your wings, I guess you won't mind if I pry them open. I'm going to tell a story of a bird that once lived with my late wife and myself. He was a beautiful little canary named Mikey, little yellow canary. And Marjorie began to feel sorry for him, being in this, it was a standard size, big enough cage for a canary. But nevertheless, she felt sorry for him. So one day, we took the cage out on the back porch and opened the door of the cage so that Mikey could fly away. Instead, Mikey retreated to the farthest corner of the cage, the part of the cage the farthest away from the open door of the cage. And literally, I mean, he looked at us as if to say, "Are you crazy? Close that door." So we did, and we took him back inside. And he lived the rest of his wonderful life, singing beautifully. So we, so to speak, pried Mikey's bars open, but he wasn't having any. He knew how tiny he was, how big the world was. He wasn't having any. So I guess great lions can find peace in a cage, but we should only do that as a last resort.
So, Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
so I guess the one kind of interpretation that I see is that we can get in this cycle of birth, rebirth, sort of that cage,
Mm-hmm.
but God, when we do the spiritual process, He sort of pulls us, like I think you mentioned in the Holy Mother's birthday or one of those talks, that Mother pulls you through the keyhole.
Sometimes, yes,
And
that's
so maybe sort of I see a parallel in that we may be content with this coming and going, but sometimes he just has to try that, and so we can get free.
yeah. What the nun said that gave us that talk was, Mother may may release you, and she may do it by propping the door open with her foot so that you can walk out, or she may pull you through the keyhole, which is going to strip off a lot of stuff and won't be all that pleasant sometimes. But on the other side is freedom. Nothing then that will restrain your wings. That's the. So it's interesting to me that Rumi, and I'm sure it must have been Rumi, not Ladinsky, changes metaphors in midstream here. We have flying lions in the second verse. Great lions can find peace in a cage. So those bars I see that restrain your wings, well, suddenly we have lions with wings, of which there's iconography from I think Babylonia, Mesopotamia, maybe, that shows pictures of lions with wings. I don't think the lions outside the New York Public Library have wings.
And when I read that, or when you were reading that phrase, so these bars I see that restrain your wings, I thought, well, lions have wings now, or is that a general term, like to all of us, you know, to like you and me and all of us out there, you know?
Yes.
So I wondered how, you know, that was to be interpreted.
Well, I think it means it for us to for it to strike us and make us think, Heidi. I think you're absolutely right. Like I
However,
say, I don't think Ladinsky would change Rumi's metaphors. But there, as I stopped to think about it, even when I was reading the poem the second time, I thought, oh yes, I remember seeing pictures of lions with wings.
So I was just looking up in Google. So lions with wing, the winged lion is a mythological symbol which represents the patron saint, the evangelist Saint Mark.
Wow, that's interesting. But does it say anything more about that? About the mythology of lions with wings?
Says it is the traditional symbol of the city of Venice and previously belonged to the Republic of Venice.
Hmm.
And there's a name for this creature. It's called griffin.
Ah, a griffin. Bart, you were nodding your head. Do you know something about this? You're muted.
I'm muted. I remember the name Griffin just as she said it, and then the four gospel writers, or the people attributed to writing the four gospels, are um, also have mythological connections with other creatures.
Well,
But I didn't really.
Saint Mark is the one with the winged lion.
There's a bull, I believe, and an eagle. And I'd have to do a little research on that to refresh my memory about the four gospel writers are represented as a lion. One is a lion with wings, which is Mark. And then so I have to look up the other three.
Well, it's okay. I
It's
just wondered if you knew anything because you were nodding
Oh,
rather vigorously when you heard that. So this lion with wings is not a. So Heidi, it is apparently a mythological creature named a griffin. So
very interesting.
yeah, something else to ponder on or even look up, I guess. It's spelled. Is it spelled O-N or I-N? Griffin or O-N? When you looked it up,
Iron.
is it spelled
I-N.
I-N? Okay.
I-N.
Griffin, not Griffon, but Griffin. Okay. And speaking for myself, I'll be perfectly happy to have Rumi pry open the bars of my cage. And he says he can do it. He says he can reach through the mythology, the illusion of time, and do it. So get with it, Rumi. Oh, this next one, Heidi. Please, you read this next one because this is Rumi at his humorous best.
Okay.
I'm sure if you haven't already enjoyed this one, you'll enjoy it much.
Just the title alone, right?
Right.
Bloodsuckers from Hell. Rumi speaking to a crowd muses, watch out for those bloodsuckers from hell, because they're everywhere. And the crowd wisely retorts, "That sounds serious. What do they look like? Any hints? Are they usually disguised?" Rumi again, "Yes, usually they are awful tricky. How then to detect them? Well, I have noticed their eyes will narrow and their faces begin to squint like prunes if they hear good poetry."
Yeah.
Oh my,
Read it again for us.
sure. Bloodsuckers from hell. Rumi speaking to a crowd muses, "Watch out for those bloodsuckers from hell, because they're everywhere." And the crowd wisely retorts, "That sounds serious. What do they look like? Any hints? Are they usually disguised?" Rumi again, "Yes, usually they are awfully tricky. How then to detect them? Well, I have noticed their eyes will narrow and their faces begin to squint like prunes if they hear good poetry."
Amen. I think we all know one or two people at least like that. Yeah. Their eyes begin, their eyes narrow and their faces begin to squint like prunes. Yeah.
It reminds me of something. I don't know if he coined the term, but I've only heard it from Andy Irwin. It refers to people. He's a storyteller and songwriter professional, and can be very funny, part of what he does. And he talks about running across people in his line of work who have what he calls HDD, which is humor deficit disorder.
Yes. Yes.
They are bloodsuckers from hell too.
Oh, yes.
I think they're the
Well,
same.
they'd be this, some of the same ones that he's talking about here.
Yeah,
Well,
they.
I can remember in your past, Cindy, that there's somebody that you knew well. You began to write different kinds of songs, and his eyes narrowed and his face began to squint like a prune. And he says, "What are you doing that for?"
That is a true story. It was a turning point in my life and in my music career.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Very interesting.
And some of the songs you wrote were just absolutely transcendent.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to do your thing, even if your partner of 9 years squints his eyes and says, "What in the heck are you doing?" You
Yeah,
just got to do it anyway.
that's right.
But we're still friends now. I mean, we are friends now. So,
Yeah. Well, he got over himself.
yeah, it took a couple of years.
Yeah.
What exactly is squinting like prunes?
Well, what is a prune? All dried up and wrinkly.
Ah,
And a dried prune is all dried up and wrinkly. Not the ones you take for your digestive system, but the real dried prunes are all dried up and wrinkly. All dried fruit gets all wrinkly, but prunes. I mean, you know how if if you have your hands in water for too long, and particularly certain kinds of water, if you're in the salt water of the ocean, and your fingers, your hands get all puckery. Yeah, that's all the water's been taken out of them, been sucked out of them, so they get wrinkly.
is the funniest poems of all of these poems, Brother Shankara.
Yes.
This is the hilarious one. I know we see everywhere all the bloodsuckers from hell. Right now we can see them.
Oh, yes. And, they're the ones who want to make absolutely certain
Yep,
that the arts are not taught in school.
that's right. That's right.
So that was the last of Rumi's poems. We've got another 20 minutes. Shall we move on to Meister Eckhart? Which, by the way, is, you talk about a breath of fresh air, because at least for me as a Westerner, I so relate to Meister Eckhart. The Swami who started this center, Swami Yogeshananda, also was very, very attuned to and fond of Meister Eckhart. Keith, do you have the book? Keith, are you there? Oh, I thought I saw him. Okay,
I think he's gone.
okay. Well,
Do you want me to read?
yeah, if you would read the biography of Meister Eckhart, that would be sweet.
I love Meister Eckhart too.
Yeah.
So much. Okay. Oh, Meister Eckhart. It starts with a quote from him. It says, "A hand in my soul can reach out and touch Jerusalem, as my other hand tastes the beauty of the Rhine." Meister Eckhart, 1260 to 1328, is one of history's great mystics. His religious writings are so eloquent that they helped evolve the German language. He was a Catholic monk and scholar who often presented his faith and spiritual understandings in sermons of stunning clarity, though the Catholic Church apparently feared Eckhart's brilliance and was on the verge of bringing him before a kind of inquisition when he died. The works of Meister Eckhart are a theological treasure. They are perhaps at times even divine revelation. Meister Eckhart was born in the village of Hochheim in Germany. Hochheim. That's kind of onomatopoeic.
Right.
In Germany. When he was a young man, he joined the Dominicans at Erfurt. Those are some funny names. He superbly blended the life of contemplation within a career of great external involvement. He became a teacher, and then in 1298 was made prior of the Dominican convent at Erfurt and vicar provincial of Thuringia. In 1300, he began to lecture in Paris, and 2 years later was given the degree of Master of Sacred Theology by his order. When he returned to Erfurt, he was made provincial for the large province of Saxony, and later he was appointed vicar general for Bohemia and was asked to reform the demoralized monasteries there. In 1311, he again went to Paris and took up a professorship. He was made first professor of his order at Cologne in 1320 and remained there for the rest of his life, which was another 8 years. He was considered by many an ideal priest and scholar. It was life itself that Eckhart loved to talk about, the life of the fields and the life of the sky and the wonders of the human heart. It is easy to see how he raised many a brow when he spoke out like this. Is this not a holy trinity? The firmament, the earth, our bodies. And is it not an act of worship to hold a child and till the soil and lift a cup? And communion, first seek that from your lover's soul before anything offered from a priest. His deep and radical insights and his great popularity with his countrymen led to accusations of heresy. Eckhart publicly defended himself in February of 1327, stating that he had always believed God was as God said he was, indivisible. And that sincere contemplation of God's own description of himself turned into the sublime experiences and compassionate understanding that he preached and wrote about. Eckhart died the following year. The church condemned and suppressed his work and probably destroyed a lot of it. In the 1880s, 2 Latin manuscripts of Eckhart's were found. Since 1980, the Dominican order has sought to reveal that Eckhart was an exemplary Christian mystic and priest.
Indeed. And for those of you who are interested in his sermons, you can find them online on YouTube, being read, very capably read. Oh, a dear friend of Cindy's and mine, Debbie Richardson, says that they sustain her. She listens to his sermons, and that's at least a part of her spiritual practice. She's not part of this congregation. She's just I know her primarily as a Facebook friend.
She visited for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a link to those videos, Cindy, or the sermon?
I don't, but
You can find them easily, Aaron, on YouTube. Just go on YouTube and in the search window put Sermons of Meister Eckhart, and they'll pop right up. So you don't.
Okay, great.
It's the YouTube search window. You can also go on Google, and who knows, you might find some other resources, but there you can find them on YouTube by Google, by putting in just the words that I said. Anyone have anything they'd like to say about Meister Eckhart?
Yeah, I want to say I think it's really cool that, with how substantial his work was in spiritual value, that he was just only recently discovered. Like a century and a half ago or so.
Well, the Dominicans have known about him all along.
Oh, okay.
They treasured him. And during that period of scholasticism in the Catholic Church, of course, the mystics were sidelined. And the Dominican order, like all the orders, had to adhere to what was coming from Rome, from the Pope, about how to practice. So during the period of scholasticism, the mystics were sidelined. But the Dominicans never forgot about him. And I don't know this of my own knowledge. I know this from reading what, as I said, Swami Yogeshananda, the Swami that founded this center, wrote about him. It was republished recently in a series, in a publication that comes out of England. And it was fascinating to read.
I was when I was reading the bio in the first part about the Catholic Church feared his brilliance and was on the verge of blah blah blah, and I was thinking those are Rumi's bloodsuckers from hell.
Yes. Yes, well, they exist in every organization, and sometimes they come to the ascendancy.
Yeah.
And they have come to the ascendancy in the Catholic Church like they do in all organizations from time to time. And yes, they always, those who are have that dominant personality of linearity and they don't like the unpredictability of mystical discovery.
And that is a shame.
It is, and it is what makes them bloodsuckers from hell.
Mm.
Sometimes even to the point where they burn people at the stake and stuff. You know, we know that of the Catholic Church, but they certainly were not the only ones who did that kind of thing with their heretics. I mean, even in India, which has a reputation for tolerating spiritual diversity, there are times when terrible things were done. Certainly in Islam, and for that matter, if you study the spirituality of Mexico and the Andes, you'll find that those spiritual traditions also had some real terrors. Real terror. So I'm going to take the liberty of reading Eckhart's first poem. We probably won't have much time to discuss it this evening, but we can read it again next week. It's, as always, what Ladinsky does is he leads with one of the strongest cards in the poet's hand and the most self-revelatory. When I was the forest, when I was the stream, when I was the forest, when I was still the field, when I was every hoof, foot, fin, and wing, when I was the sky itself, no one ever asked me, did I have a purpose? No one ever wondered, was there anything I might need? For there was nothing I could not love. It was when I left all we once were that the agony began. The fear and questions came, and I wept, and tears I had never known before. So I returned to the river. I returned to the mountains. I asked for their hand in marriage again. I begged to wed every object and creature. And when they accepted, God was ever present in my arms. And he did not say, where have you been? I'll read it again. When I was the forest, when I was the stream, when I was the forest, when I was still the field, when I was every hoof, foot, fin, and wing, when I was the sky itself. No one ever asked me, did I have a purpose? No one ever wondered, was there anything I might need? For there was nothing I could not love. It was when I left all we once were that the agony began. The fear and questions came, and I wept. I wept. And tears I had never known before. So I returned to the river. I returned to the mountains. I asked for their hand in marriage again. I begged to wed every object and creature. And when they accepted, God was ever present in my arms. And he did not say, where have you been?
Brother Shankara, there are a few more lines in that poem in my book.
Are there? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't click one more time. For then I knew my soul, every soul, has always held him. For then I knew my soul, every soul, has always held him. Thank you so much. The way I have to have it so big on my screen so I can read it, I wasn't aware that there was another couplet. Thank you. So let me read the last two again. And when they accepted, God was ever present in my arms, and he did not say, where have you been? For then I knew my soul, every soul, has always held him. Thank you, Swam. That is the right ending to that poem.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
this is so much like what we have been talking in Vedanta, Upanishads, like that. For then I knew my soul, every soul has always held him. So we always believe in that conscience is one and everyone shares the same conscience. And also he sees God in everything, which is very similar to Upanishads. So similar to what Krishna tells Arjuna. That's what we all believe in too. Hindus believe in that too.
Truth is one, sages call it by many names.
Yeah.
And we can just replace the word sages by mystics.
Even
Truth is
Jesus
one.
Christ believes the same, very similar.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Same.
The truth is within you
Yes.
and without you,
Mm-hmm.
yet you see it not.
Yes.
And this is why I just think it's so interesting what we read about, what Cindy read in the biography of when he was defending himself against the church's accusation of heresy.
Yeah.
He said, I've just always believed what God said about himself. He's indivisible. So there we are.
So didn't the church accept him, Brother Shankara, in those days in 1200s and 1300s? They didn't accept his philosophy.
Well, in the beginning they did.
Okay.
But always what happens, well, I shouldn't say always that I know about.
Most of the time.
Much of the time anyway.
Yeah.
When one of these mystic saints begins to become too popular,
Mm.
the church feels, and this even happened more recently with a saint named Padre, P-A-D-R-E, Padre Pio, P-I-O, an Italian. He became illumined He actually manifested. This is one of the unusual things that sometimes happens when one of these mystics so identifies with the Christ. He actually manifested the stigmata, the bleeding holes in his hands and feet, and the wound in his side. And of course, he began to be very, very popular. And so the church, this time, they didn't, they just sidelined him. They assigned him to a situation where it was very difficult for the public to access him and so on. But you can read about him, and there are some wonderful films about him that you can find online.
Sure.
But yes, and this is why the Sufis, who are the mystical aspect of Islam, have so often had to run for it. You know, the Orthodox Islamic teachers don't like to hear about this indivisible God. They don't like to hear about the fact that everyone can realize the divine being. So I think that'll do it for this week, eh?
Thank you.
Would anyone like to close with a chant or a poem? I usually have been doing that, but if anybody else would like to say anything, a song, a chant, a poem appropriate to this season. It's still a couple of days till the end of this is the 10th day of Christmas. So there's still the 11th and 12th day of Christmas. Anything that anyone would like to? I led this evening with the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Anybody else have anything they'd like to close with? All right, I'll do this. Om, Amen. Om, Amen. Om, Amen. O Lord, take my hand. Without thee I may fall. O Lord, pull me on. Without thee I may stray. O Lord, draw me near. Thou art my all in all. O Lord, take my hand. O Lord, pull me on. Without thee I may fall. Without thee I may stray. O Lord, draw me near. Thou art my all in all. O Lord, fill this heart. O Lord, fill this heart. Thou art my all in all. Thou art my all in all. Without thee I may fall. Om, Amen. So, dear ones, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. And may you have peace of mind. And may you go forward in the loving embrace of the divine presence, the loving and protective embrace of the divine presence. Until we see one another again, which could be as soon as tomorrow evening, when we study the life of Holy Mother, or until next week. Heidi, do you know why June is not able to be with us?
Well, I called her last week, after last week's class, and she just didn't think, I'm not sure why she's not here tonight, but she just kind of assumed during the holidays we weren't meeting.
Ah,
And so maybe I should put that on my calendar to give her a ring on Monday, Monday after,
that would be sweet.
to
That would be
remind
sweet.
her. But
Thank you, Heidi.
she's doing good. She's fine,
That's good. She
so
sent me the sweetest card.
I love June. I love her up, man.
Yes, indeed. How old is she, Heidi?
She was 95, like May 1st is her birthday. So, but I told her that we all were thinking of her and missed her, and
Yeah.
and all that. So,
Well, the card she sent is one of those wonderful cards that when you unfold it, there's a scene inside that unfolds that, and it's the nativity scene,
oh, neat.
and it is so beautiful.
Like
It's
a 3D.
really a lovely nativity, and and there it is. You unfold the card, and the card stays when you handle it properly. The card stays open, and there's this lovely little nativity scene, and she wrote a sweet message. But she's so dear to us.
Yeah,
Um,
I love June dearly. I mean, I really do.
95 and still making soup and sending it. She recently made a pot of vegetable soup and just on her own. I mean,
I know it. She's
Elizabeth was there and June sent it home, but she had made it a purpose to send some.
yeah.
And 95 and nearly blind, and she made some lovely soup.
I mean, that's what she does. She has some of us from yoga, because I'm in Elizabeth's yoga class, over out on her back deck, and
Right.
I call her and I say, June, are you going to order from a restaurant? Do you want me to pick up, or can I, bring a couple things? Can I help you with this luncheon? No, 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 no. And at the last minute, she decides not to order, pick up. And she made soup. She made cupcakes. She made a delicious salad.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, we had coffee with the cupcakes. I mean, she just,
I know.
we're amazed at her. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, she's a treasure.
She is. Well, thank you all for tonight. This was great. And
Well, thank you, Heidi, for being with us.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
All right.
good night.
Good night, everyone.
Right.